Noor had always thought her home was a place of safety, a place where nothing could break the calm she carefully maintained. But that evening she felt something different, something she couldn't quite name. The house was quiet, quieter than usual. Adam, her 6-year-old son, had been unusually still, sitting cross-legged on the floor and lining up his small toy cars along the hallway. The rhythmic clatter of the cars was the only sound, until she realized the sound of running water from the bathroom was unusually loud. Rayan, her husband, had been in the shower longer than normal, and a small knot formed in her stomach. It wasn't a conscious thought, just a fleeting sense of unease she tried to dismiss. Noor returned to the couch where she had been scrolling on her phone, pretending to be calm. She heard Adam's soft humming, a tune he often made when he was happy or deep in thought. But this time, it sounded different, almost like a background noise that highlighted the silence of the house. She glanced toward the hallway. Adam was walking slowly, holding a small toy in one hand and his tiny phone in the other. Noor frowned slightly, unsure of what he was doing, but before she could ask, Adam approached the bathroom door. The knock came softly, almost hesitant, but Noor's heart immediately jumped. "Papa," Adam said in his small, clear voice, "someone is calling you." Noor froze, her mind racing. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She could feel the air change in the room, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Adam, in his innocence, didn't understand the tension that now filled the hallway. He stood there, waiting for his father to respond. Noor noticed the way Rayan's hand paused mid-motion, water still dripping from his hair as he listened. Then came the voice. It was calm, smooth, and familiar in a way that made Noor's heart skip. It wasn't loud or demanding, wasn't a ringtone or an automated message. It was real, soft, human, the kind of voice that could only belong to someone who knew him well. Someone from a life Noor had thought had ended long before she had married Rayan. The words weren't angry. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Just hearing that voice in the hallway echoing through the door changed everything. Noor felt a chill run down her spine. A sudden realization that the life she had carefully built, the love she had nurtured, and the trust she had placed in her husband were now vulnerable. Her mind raced in fragments. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe she was imagining it. But she knew deep inside, in that immediate and unavoidable gut feeling, that it was not nothing. She hadn't known worry could feel so sharp, so sudden, so powerful. The knock in Adam's innocent announcement had opened a door she wasn't ready to face. Noor's fingers tightened around the edge of the couch as she tried to steady her breathing. She didn't want Adam to notice the tension, didn't want him to feel the change in the air. He stood there, small and curious, expecting the usual response from his father, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind the bathroom door. The bathroom remained silent for a moment longer than necessary. Noor could hear the slow, uneven breathing of Rayan through the slightly cracked door. Adam's small voice, simple and patient, said again, "Papa." There was hesitation now, a gentle insistence that this call needed attention. Noor's stomach twisted as she watched him, her son's innocence contrasting sharply with the sudden weight of the adult world pressing down around her. She realized in that instant how fragile life could feel, how quickly trust and comfort could be disrupted, and how a child's curiosity could accidentally expose truths that were meant to remain hidden. Then, as if the silence itself had grown too heavy, Rayan's footsteps shuffled toward the door. Noor's heart thumped violently. He opened it slowly, avoiding her gaze. His eyes were pale, his face tense, and there was a stiffness in his movements that spoke volumes. He was holding a phone tightly, as if it were the last connection to a world outside their home, a world that didn't involve Noor or Adam. Adam, sensing a change, stepped back slightly. But his eyes were bright, curious, and unafraid. He had no idea that his small action, his innocent knock, had just revealed a hidden part of his father's life. Noor's mind began to race, trying to process the moment in fractions of seconds. What was this? Who was this woman? How long had this been happening? The questions came so fast she could barely keep up with them. She didn't yell, she didn't cry, she simply watched. The words didn't matter yet. The silence, the pause, the subtle tension in the air, those were the words. Noor understood in that instant that trust had been broken, and nothing could instantly repair it. Adam, unaware of the magnitude of the moment, tugged slightly at Rayhan's sleeve. "Is it okay?" he asked, his small voice filled with genuine concern. Noor felt a stab of sorrow. Her son, so young, would have to grow up understanding that adults could make mistakes, that people could hurt the ones they loved the most, sometimes without meaning to. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. She wanted to protect him from the truth, even if she herself could no longer avoid it. Rayhan stepped out fully now, the water still dripping from his hair. For the first time he looked at Noor. Avoiding her gaze no longer worked. His eyes, heavy and guilty, told the story that his words had yet to confirm. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Noor could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on both of them, a tension that stretched like a taut string between her heart and his. She wanted clarity. She wanted honesty. And above all, she wanted to understand how someone she had trusted could let another voice enter their life in such a quiet but piercing way. The woman's voice from the other side of the door had lingered in the hallway like a ghost. It didn't speak again, but its presence remained. A reminder that some doors once opened could never be closed in the same way again. Noor felt a deep ache in her chest, a sudden loneliness that came not from being alone, but from realizing that the person she loved had carried a part of himself into another world, a world she had never been part of. Her thoughts tumbled quickly, one after the other. Had she missed signs? Was this loneliness mutual, or was it just a fleeting connection for him? Could trust ever be rebuilt after a moment like this? As the seconds stretched, Noor took a deep breath and looked at Adam. His face, bright and innocent, seemed untouched by the gravity of the situation. He had no clue that his small knock had revealed a truth that would change the atmosphere of their home, maybe forever. Noor felt both pride and sorrow at the same time. Pride in his innocence, his courage to speak, and sorrow because his pure action had inadvertently exposed something meant to remain hidden. Her hand lightly rested on the couch as if she needed to ground herself in the reality of the room. A room that felt suddenly foreign despite being her home. Rayhan finally spoke, his voice quiet and hesitant. He tried to explain, to downplay, to make it sound like nothing, but the effort fell flat. Noor listened without interrupting. Each word seemed both meaningless and devastating. There was no anger yet, only a profound sense of understanding that the life she thought she had known was shifting. And in that moment, she realized that life's most painful revelations could come in the smallest, most innocent ways. A child's knock, a quiet voice, a pause too long. The water finally stopped running. The hallway remained still. Tom wandered back to his toys, completely unaware of the silent tension that hung around the bathroom door like an invisible curtain. Noor's eyes lingered on him for a long moment, and then she turned back to Rayhan. The air between them was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Words were not needed yet. The truth had already spoken louder than any argument, louder than any shouting could. Noor understood as the night stretched on that some moments didn't require action immediately. Some moments required quiet observation, a careful gathering of strength before facing what had been uncovered. The knock, the phone, the voice. Adam's small announcement, they had all combined into a single, undeniable moment of clarity. She couldn't unhear the voice. She couldn't ignore the implication. And she couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. Her thoughts circled. It's like a storm. Trust, love, betrayal. Family. How do you reconcile these things when innocence has exposed what was hidden? She watched Rayhan carefully, noticing the subtle tremble in his hands. The avoidance of eye contact, the hesitation in his posture. He had been caught, not by her, but by the universe, by chance, by a child's simple act of curiosity. And that made the revelation feel both accidental and inevitable at the same time. Noor realized then that life could change in a single moment. Not with a crash, not with a confrontation, but quietly, subtly, almost innocently. A knock on a bathroom door, a child's voice. And suddenly everything she believed about her home, her love, and her husband's heart felt fragile. Noor sat quietly, her mind racing but her body still, as if holding still could somehow pause. The world long enough to absorb the truth. The evening stretched on, but nothing was as it had been. Noor understood that this moment, this part one of a revelation, was only the beginning. It had started with a knock, a simple, ordinary knock, and yet it had unleashed a wave of questions, emotions, and realizations that would take her weeks, maybe months, to fully understand. But in that first part, in that first quiet exposure, she understood the most important thing: nothing in life stays. Noor couldn't sleep that night. The events of the evening had left her mind spinning, her heart tight with questions she didn't yet have answers for. Adam slept peacefully in his room, unaware of the tension that had filled their home just hours before. Noor stayed on the couch, her hands clasped together, her eyes fixed on the dim glow of the hallway light. She could hear the faint ticking of the clock, each second marking the quiet passage of time, yet making the night feel heavier, longer, more suffocating. Rayan had gone to the bedroom, but she didn't follow. She wasn't ready to face him yet, not until she understood what she felt, what she needed, and what she was willing to confront. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the curtains, painting soft lines across the floor. Adam ran into the living room, his laughter a small relief against the tension that still clung to Noor's chest. She forced a smile and ruffled his hair, hiding the ache in her heart. Rayan appeared behind him, drying his hair with a towel, trying to look normal, but Noor could see through it. There was guilt in his eyes, an awkwardness in his movements, and a hesitance in the words he chose. He didn't know how to start the conversation, and Noor didn't know how to allow it to begin. Both were trapped in a delicate balance, where one wrong word could shatter what remained of trust between them. Finally, Rayan spoke, his voice low, careful, almost fragile. "Noor, I need to explain." She turned to him, her eyes narrowing just slightly, a quiet storm behind them. "Explain what?" she asked, though she already knew. Her voice was steady, controlled, but her heart thudded violently. He swallowed, staring at the floor, and finally the words came. He spoke of loneliness, of missed conversations, of long nights where he felt unheard, unseen. He spoke of Lena, a woman from his past, someone who had reappeared at a time when he felt fragile. Each word pierced Noor, not with anger, but with a deep, profound sadness that left her chest aching. She listened quietly, letting the words wash over her. She didn't interrupt, she didn't argue, she didn't cry. She simply let the story unfold. Nora's mind raced as she absorbed his explanation. She remembered the nights she had stayed awake waiting for him to come home, remembering all the small moments they had shared, all the times she had believed they were connected. And yet, in those same moments, he had felt lonely enough to turn toward someone else. It was a betrayal not of lust, not of passion, but of trust, intimacy, and emotional connection. Her heart broke quietly, like a glass falling and cracking. The sound almost inaudible, but the damage clear and permanent. She wanted to scream. She wanted to ask 100 questions at once, but she held herself back. She needed clarity first. She needed to understand. Rayan tried to justify himself, but Noor didn't need justification. She needed honesty, transparency, and a commitment to truth. She needed to know why this had happened and whether the life they had built together could survive it. The silence that followed his words was heavy. Noor felt a mix of heartbreak and relief. Heartbreak because of the betrayal, and relief because, finally, the truth was out. No more hiding, no more secrets. She could finally see the reality of the situation. And the reality was complicated, painful, and emotionally charged. She asked him simple, direct questions. How long was it serious? Does it mean anything now? Rayon's answers were halting, each one more painful than the last. It had been months. There had been emotional attachment, late-night calls, and secret conversations. And yet, he insisted it hadn't turned into a full affair. Noor understood what he meant, but it didn't lessen the pain. Emotional infidelity could be just as devastating as physical betrayal, she realized. The intimacy he had shared with Lena, the connection he had formed outside their marriage, had been hidden from her, and the knowledge of it now hung between them like a storm cloud. Noor felt a wave of sadness for Adam, her child. Innocent and trusting, was growing up in a home where love had been complicated, fragile, and uncertain. She thought of the knock on the bathroom door, Adam's small voice, and the way he had unknowingly exposed a hidden part of their lives. She wondered how this revelation would shape him, how it would influence his understanding of love, trust, and family. Noor's heart ached for her son, for the innocence that had been momentarily confronted with adult complications. She knew she had to protect him to keep the house stable, even as her own heart wrestled with heartbreak and betrayal. Rayan attempted to apologize, his words rushed and awkward. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, Noor. I still love you." Noor's chest tightened. Love wasn't enough anymore, not when trust had been broken. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the warmth of his words, but the truth was heavier than any promise he could make. She needed time, space, and reflection. She needed to consider whether love could coexist with betrayal, whether forgiveness could coexist with heartbreak. The answers were not simple. They never were. Noor left the room, needing to be alone, to think, to breathe. She walked slowly to the kitchen, brewed herself tea, and sat by the window, staring at the street below. The world outside felt ordinary, peaceful, as if unaware of the turbulence within her own home. She thought of the early days of their marriage, of the laughter, the plans, the dreams they had shared. And she realized that even the strongest love could be shaken by silence, neglect, and emotional distance. Trust, once broken, demanded more than words. It demanded actions, patience, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Rayan followed, quietly after a while, sitting across from her, watching her without interrupting. She didn't speak, only sipped her tea, letting the warmth calm her nerves. He wanted to reach out to touch her hand, but she remained distant, a physical boundary reflecting the emotional one she had erected. She wanted to feel safe again, to believe that their home could feel like a sanctuary. But first, she needed assurance, proof, and a commitment to honesty that went beyond explanations. Over the next few days, Noor observed Rayan carefully. Every action, every word, every glance mattered. She noticed when he stayed late at work, when he avoided conversations, and he tried to act normal around Adam. She realized that trust was no longer something she could assume. It had to be rebuilt carefully, brick by brick. She decided to focus on small victories, honest conversations, shared meals, time spent together as a family. She wasn't ready to forgive fully, but she was willing to see whether the love that remained could survive the cracks that had appeared. Noor also began reflecting on her own needs. She realized that she had neglected herself, that she had allowed the comfort of routine to mask moments of disconnection. She wanted to rediscover herself, to strengthen her sense of identity, and to ensure that her happiness wasn't entirely dependent on someone else. This realization didn't make the heartbreak lighter, but it gave her a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt in months. She understood that healing would be slow, but it would begin with self-awareness, honesty, and courage. One evening, Adam fell asleep early, leaving Noor and Rayan alone in the living room. The silence was different this time, not heavy, but tense, cautious, a fragile pause filled with potential. Noor finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. Rian, I need to know if you are willing to rebuild, truly rebuild what has been broken. He nodded, his eyes earnest, voice steady. I am, he said. I want to try. I want to be better. I want us to be better. Noor felt a flicker of hope. Trust could be rebuilt, she realized, but it would take time, patience, and unwavering honesty. The journey wouldn't be easy, and neither of them would be perfect. But it could begin. They spoke late into the night, sharing feelings, fears, and regrets. Noor listened as Rayan explained why he had felt distant, why he had sought connection elsewhere, and what he intended to do differently. Noor spoke of her heartbreak, of her fears, and of her desire for emotional safety. Each word was carefully chosen, a step toward mutual understanding. They didn't solve everything, but they began to acknowledge it, to face it together. And that was the first, most crucial step. By the end of the night, Noor felt a subtle shift. The heaviness that had gripped her heart was still there, but it was accompanied by a sense of possibility. She realized that love, even when tested, could endure. But it required awareness, effort, and the courage to face painful truths. The events of the past days, triggered by a child's innocent knock, had exposed the fragility of human relationships. But they had also highlighted the power of honesty, communication, and emotional resilience. Noor looked at Rayan, seeing him, not as a betrayer or a stranger, but as a man capable of change, of growth, of reflection. She realized that heartbreak could coexist with hope, that betrayal could coexist with the possibility of redemption, and that love could survive even in its most fragile form. And as she finally prepared for sleep, feeling Adam's soft breaths from the next room, she understood that their story was far from over. Part 2 of their journey had begun, not with perfection, but with awareness, dialogue, and the cautious rekindling of trust that might one day heal the wounds that had been revealed. The weeks that followed were quiet but tense, a fragile balance of hope and uncertainty. Noor had begun to rebuild her own routine, creating a life that felt stable for Adam, while carefully observing Rayan's actions. Each day brought small tests of trust. Did he follow through on promises? Did he speak honestly? Did he make an effort to truly connect? And Rayan, for his part, seemed determined to show that he wanted change, though the weight of his past mistakes lingered between them like a shadow. Noor had realized that rebuilding a marriage after betrayal wasn't about dramatic apologies or grand gestures. It was about consistency, sincerity, and the courage to face difficult emotions day after day. The mornings started to feel different. Noor and Adam would eat breakfast together, sometimes with Rayan joining them, sharing small conversations that felt like ordinary moments but carried immense significance. Noor noticed how much these small rituals mattered. Adam's laughter, Rayan's attempts at humor, the simple sharing of a meal. It reminded her that love, even when fractured, could be nurtured through patience and presence. But the trust she had lost wasn't easy to reclaim. Every time Rayan received a call or a message, a small tension ran through her chest. She tried not to let it show, focusing on Adam, on the sunlight streaming through the windows, on the simple rhythms of their days. One evening, Noor found herself alone in the living room. The house was quiet. Adam was asleep, and Rayan had gone to check on work emails. She sat by the window, gazing at the street below, reflecting on everything that had happened. She thought of the knock, the voice, the revelation that had shattered her sense of security. And yet she also thought of the steps they had both taken since then, the conversations, the shared laughter, the quiet moments of acknowledgement. Healing, she realized, was not linear, was slow, uneven, and sometimes painful, but it was happening. Noor felt a cautious sense of hope that had been absent for weeks. Rayhan returned quietly, carrying a cup of tea. He sat beside her, careful. not to crowd her space. They didn't speak immediately, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Finally, he broke it, his voice soft and sincere. "Noor, I know I can't undo what happened, but I want you to know that I am trying. Every day to be better for you, for Adam, for us." Noor took a deep breath. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to feel the warmth of his words, to let herself trust again. But she also knew that trust was fragile and could not be rebuilt overnight. She nodded, acknowledging his effort without, promising more than she felt ready to give. The next days were filled with small, meaningful gestures. Rayon would help Adam with his homework, surprising him with patience and attention that Noor had not always seen. He would ask Noor about her day, listen without interrupting, and make space for her to express her feelings without judgment. Noor noticed these changes not as grand declarations, but as proof that he was willing to act, to take responsibility, to rebuild the connection that had been broken. Slowly, the walls between them began to soften, though Noor remained cautious, aware that one misstep could undo weeks of progress. Noor herself grew stronger, more aware of her own worth and the power of self-care. She started taking walks, visiting friends, and dedicating time to hobbies she had long ignored. This wasn't about revenge or indifference. It was about reclaiming herself and creating a life that could withstand the fragility of human relationships. She realized that healing wasn't just about forgiving others. It was about embracing one's own resilience, one's own capacity to feel, to love, and to protect oneself while remaining open to connection. One afternoon, Noor found Adam playing quietly in the living room. She watched him, thinking about how much he had changed, how observant children could be, and how much they absorbed from the emotions around them. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Do you feel happy here, Adam?" she asked gently. He looked up, his eyes wide, trusting, and nodded. "Yes, Mom. I like it here with you and Papa." Noor smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't experienced in weeks. It wasn't perfection, but it was enough for Nell, a reminder that their family could still be whole, even if it was a little fragile as the days passed. Noor and Rayhan began to spend more intentional time together. They would take walks in the evenings, share quiet dinners without distractions, and occasionally laugh over memories from the past. It wasn't easy. Sometimes old wounds resurfaced in the form of jealousy, insecurity, or doubt. But each time, they chose to communicate rather than ignore, to listen rather than blame. Noor realized that love after betrayal required more courage, more vulnerability, and more patience than love that had never been tested. It demanded honesty, consistency, and a willingness to rebuild, brick by brick, day by day. One rainy evening, as Noor and Rayan sat on the balcony, watching the droplets race down the glass, she felt a sudden sense of clarity. She thought of the nights of despair, the silence, the heartbreak, and the small victories that had brought them to this point. She realized that healing was not about forgetting the pain, but about acknowledging it, learning from it, and choosing to move forward with intention. Rayan reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Instead, she held it, letting herself feel the connection, fragile but real. Between them, the next few weeks brought unexpected closeness. Rayan would leave small notes for Noor, expressing gratitude for her patience and presence. They would share tea in the early mornings, speaking quietly about hopes, dreams, and fears. Noor began to notice a shift in herself, as well, a willingness to trust again, to believe in the possibility of love, and to accept that mistakes, while painful, could be catalysts for growth and deeper understanding. She realized that romance wasn't always about grand gestures. Sometimes it was found in the quiet consistency of care, in the honesty of words, and in the courage to remain present after betrayal. One day, Adam came running to Noor with a drawing he had made at school. It was a picture of their family, smiling, holding hands, standing under a bright sun. "Look, Mom, this is us," Kay said proudly. Noor felt tears prick her eyes. The image was simple, yet it captured everything she wanted, a family that could. survive struggles, a home filled with love and hope for the future. She hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body and the reassurance that despite the challenges, they could still be whole as the months passed. Noor noticed subtle changes in her own feelings toward Rayon. The hurt hadn't vanished, but it had softened. She could see his genuine remorse, his effort to change, and the sincerity of his love. She realized that forgiveness was not about excusing his actions, but about releasing the grip of anger and allowing space for healing. Love, she understood, was a choice as much as it was a feeling, and she chose to keep that door open cautiously, carefully, but with a willingness to rebuild what had been broken. The family slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Adam laughed more, played more, and seemed happier, sensing the stability Noor and Rayon were trying to create. The house no longer felt heavy with tension. Instead, it carried a quiet warmth, a fragile peace built on honesty, effort, and mutual care. Noor recognized that trust, once broken, could never be taken for granted, but it could be rebuilt through consistent actions, communication, and shared commitment. And she was willing to try, step by step, day by day. One evening, Noor found herself reflecting on the journey they had been through. The knock, the voice, the revelation, it had all seemed like the end at first. But in reality, it had been the beginning of a transformation. Their love had been tested, their hearts had been challenged, and their family had faced uncertainty. Yet, through it all, they had chosen awareness, dialogue, and patience. Noor realized that heartbreak, while painful, had the power to reveal truths, strengthen resilience, and deepen the appreciation for the love that remained. Rayon joined her on the balcony once more, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed her one, their fingers brushing lightly. Noor smiled, a genuine warmth rising in her chest. "I want us to keep trying," he said quietly. She nodded, feeling the weight of the past, but also the promise of the future. "We will," she replied, step by step. And in that moment, the rain outside didn't feel gloomy. It felt like a cleansing, a renewal of everything that had been shaken, a quiet acknowledgement that even after betrayal, love could survive, evolve, and thrive. They spent the night sharing memories, hopes, and dreams. The conversations were honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but always filled with the intention to connect. Noor felt a subtle shift in herself. She could feel love slowly returning, layered with caution but also enriched by understanding and growth. She realized that romance, heartbreak, and reconciliation could coexist, creating a depth of connection that might never have existed otherwise. And as she looked at Rayon, she saw not a perfect man, but a partner willing to learn, change, and rebuild together. Noo understood that life after betrayal was not simple. It required constant effort, self-reflection, and emotional courage. But it also offered the chance to rediscover love in a deeper, more intentional way. She felt gratitude for the small victories, the quiet moments of connection, and the shared laughter with Adam. She knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of possible.